Well, my subject is what he said, essentially how to fly a P-47, and I'll tell you more about this after a while, but this is the plane that I flew during the WWII. It's a P-47 Thunderbolt. You've probably heard that or seen it on TV, but this was it. Let me go back just a little bit. On December the 7th, 1941, boy, we'll all remember that. I'll bet almost W right here. Remember what you were doing on December the 7th, 1941. I remember what I was doing. I went to church. I was only 16. I come back and you turn on the radio. This was a little while before TV. And I heard immediately that Japan had bombed Pearl Harbor. And of course we knew the war had been going on in Europe for a couple of years. I thought, oh boy, you know, this is going to raise hell now, and boy it did. Wasn't too long after that, I can still remember Roosevelt and a declaration of war, blah, blah, blah. And I just knew as a 16-year-old teenager I was going to get sucked in. We all had to register for the draft, you know, earlier. So I knew I was going to be caught. So it wasn't too long. My birthday's in February, so you know, just a couple of months after Pearl Harbor, I became 17. And I could just tell, 1 year from now, I'm going to be 18, and you know what's going to happen then. The draft board sends you this little envelope called greeting. What a hell of a way to get a letter. So I had to do something. I really wanted to finish high school. And where I lived in Louisville, Kentucky, they were taking you right out of high school. 1 week after you were 18, bang, and that was it. And I went down to the post office, and the Air Force was recruiting down there. It was the Army Air Corps at that time. And they made a promise, if you'll join the aviation cadet program, we will let you finish high school. So without telling my parents, after school one day I went down and, oh, you took a whole raft of tests. You know, they had dexterity tests, physical tests, medical tests, all sorts of stuff. Well, I passed all that stuff. That night I went home and we were sitting there having dinner, my mother, my father, my sister, my brother, and I said, I've got something to tell you. Today I joined the Army Air Corps as an aviation cadet, and boy, they about had a fit. Then they got to thinking, he gets to finish high school this way. So they kind of got off that, and I did. The Air Force was very nice. They did let me finish high school, and a week after. And then I got this little letter, report to Indianapolis, Indiana, to Camp Atterbury. Still over there, I think. So finally, our day of getting through with advanced, and we had a big graduation and all, and that was great. Well, then the next thing, it turned out that we had some P-40s. Anyone remember what a P-40 Warhawk looks like? Over in General Chennault, flew them over in China, and they put the eagle's head on the bottom of the front of the plane. Well, we had 10 of those on the air base. And after you graduated, we got to get 10 hours in a Warhawk. And boy, are these a fast airplane. It was the one and only fighter plane they had back in the 30s. And that's why they were using them over in China. And boy, they were nice. It's got a big inline engine. Heck, that thing is about that long. And an inline engine is going to have a lot of torque on it. Meaning when you push the throttle all the way forward and you get a lot of power, that thing wants to turn left in a hurry. You've got to push real hard on the right foot. So I knew this. My time came, boy, I had to get out here and I get out on the end of the runway. You couldn't stay too long because this was a liquid-cooled engine. It would overheat if you stay very long. So you got to get out there, do your thing, push the throttle up, and away you go. In the meantime, the AT-6s that I'd just been flying in prior to that, they come up to the runway and stop because they were landing on the sod, the grass. we took off on the runway with the P-40s. So I get out on the end of the runway, shove the throttle up, start putting my foot down there, and this damn plane just starts doing that. I pushed as hard as I could, and I started to go off the side of the runway, and here are all these AT-6s lined up. I thought, oh boy, I'm going to hit one of those damn things. I just pulled back on the stick. I got enough power. I went right over the top of them. Scared me to death. It had to scare the hell out of them. I learned, don't ever do that then. Then the next day I flew and I learned how to do it. You start pushing before you ever put the throttle in. Get ahead of the plane, as they say. Don't let it get ahead. So I never had that trouble again. The trouble is on the second flight, made a beautiful takeoff. And I was just gotten the gear up. I was just pulled the gear up, and my feet got hot. What the hell's going on? I looked down and oil was shooting up in the bottom of the cockpit on the floor. Oh my. And the oil was kind of hot, so I put my feet up on the top of the rudder pedal so I didn't get too damn hot. Immediately called the tower and declared an emergency. Made a quick right turn, came right around, landed the P-40, put the gear down, and landed real nice and taxied in. And I was madder than hell. I had brand new shoes on since I got my commission, and they were soaked in this hot oil. And I pulled off to the side, and then some young kid comes up. He had been one that put oil in the plane and forgot to put the tap back on. And as soon as you give it power, the oil pump just pumped it right out the top, and it hits the top of the cowling and fell back to the bottom of the cockpit, which was me. And I got this 18-year-old kid and ripped him a new one. Hell, I was 19, so a year older than he was. But that was my first real problem that I'd ever really run into, and it scared the hell out of me. Because they thought I was just going to go on out and land it in a field. I said, no, make a quick turn, and sure enough, came back. I don't know how long the engine would have run, but it wouldn't have run more than a minute at the very most. Without oil, that thing's not going to run hardly at all. Wow. So I just made the real quick land and came down and did that. We got 10 hours of flying in a P-40, and really it was wonderful. It's a lot of power plane. And you're up there all by yourself. They never made a dual P-40, so the first time you take off is the first time you take off, all by yourself. So we all got our 10 hours, and then we got back in our AT-6s, and they had 130 caliber machine gun on them. And we would go out, they sent us to Florida, and we would go out over the Gulf of Mexico, and they had an AT-6 with a target behind it, and with just our single 30 caliber, we'd go up and so on. And this is where we learned our first air-to-air gunnery. And it was interesting. They didn't want you to get closer than 30 degrees. We'd get so wrapped up in it, I'm going to get that thing, and you're right behind him, and the guy pulling the target didn't like that very much. He'd see these tracer bullets going up beside him, and call up and say, get the hell off my tail. You're supposed to break it off. You start off at about 45 degrees and then break it off at 30. So we got some gunnery practice. That was the first time we did that. And that was in the AT-6. Flying the P-47 then, first time again. It's always a thrill the first time because there's no such thing as a dual P-47. And they go out and kind of get familiar with everything, turn around and come back. And I did that, and I thought, boy, it's a lot of airplane. It was much bigger than P-40s were, and a lot more power, a lot more weight, just everything. Came back, felt real good. Next day, let's go out and do the same thing. Got in my plane, and there we go. Flip up the handle for the gear, and I'm go up there, and I'm flying around, and I noticed we got a bunch of lights on our plane. Boy, there's all sorts of lights, and you got to know what every one of them is. We had two little sets of gear lights. If they're green, that means the we had two, one for left and one for right gear. If it's green, that means the gear's down, you're clear to land. If it's red, they're up and sucked away, don't land. Yellow means it's on the way up or on the way down. So I glanced down there. I'm up by this time up 3,000 or 4,000 feet, and I'm going like about out of hell. And I pulled the gear up there, and I looked at this thing, and I saw that the right one was on red. You know, it's sucked up. And I looked at the left one; it was on yellow. Oh. Well, what the hell? It can't be coming up now, you know. So I said, well, something's wrong. I put the gear back down, and then I'll suck them up. Same thing. So I thought, well, maybe it's stuck. I didn't know. I climbed up to about 8,000 feet and dived down. I thought maybe it's stuck. I'll pull it out, you know. Of course, that didn't work. Finally, I said, you know, maybe I better call them and tell them. So I called up the tower, Seymour Johnson Tower. This is Army 391. I got trouble with my gear. And they said, well, stand by. So I just listened. Pretty soon, the guy gets on there, a P-47 pilot, and says, here's what we want you to do. Climb up to about 10,000 feet, dive down, and at the same time you're diving down, start pumping the auxiliary power pump. Your auxiliary hydraulic pump, their hydraulic gear. And then pull out. So I dive down, and I'm pulling out, and I'm pumping like hell like that, you know, trying to push the thing out. That didn't work. You know, I still had a red light over here and a yellow light over here, meaning this one is up and that one's part way up or something. So I called them back. I didn't work. They said, well, stand by. We'll send somebody up and see what's wrong. So pretty soon, here comes a P-47. He zooms up right close to me, and he's looking up there. Yeah, it's stuck all right. Well, yeah, I knew that. It's stuck all right. It was stuck right up in the bottom here. So they said, well, stand by, we'll tell you what to do. So I'm flying around there for a while, and they finally come back on the radio and say, here's what we want you to do, because you've tried everything we can think of. You've got to know that Seymour Johnson Field is only about 50 miles from the Atlantic Ocean. So they said, you fly over to the Atlantic Ocean, and just as you get to the shoreline, bail out. Jesus. So I didn't want to do that. But I thought, you know, I would, except there was one reason I really couldn't do that. Remember, I'd just gotten there a few days earlier, and none of my possessions had gotten there. They were on a bus or truck or something. But by that time, remember, we'd had our own parachutes to us, our clothes, and all of that. So I didn't, my parachute and everything, mine personal one, you know, which was fitted just right and all that, mine wasn't there. But I was rooming with a guy that was a foot taller than I was, and he was there and all of his, so I was just borrowing his stuff. And remember what this thing is, a parachute, and then a life raft, and a CO2 cylinder, and a big, they're about that much. You got to have that to see out. So you're not going to bail out in the damn thing. Nobody's going to do that. It's just something to sit on. So I've got my roommates parachuting all, and they want me to bail out. Hell, I would just fall out and keep right on going. I didn't have the nerve to tell them that. You're not supposed to do that, I guess. And I thought, well, I'll land on the sod. And they said, no, you can't land on the sod, but we don't want you on the runway, so maybe you better land on the sod. The reason they don't want you on the runway, remember this, it doesn't take much to tip a wing and touch the runway, and then it'll start spinning and make a big ball of fire and ruin their down runway for a few hours. They didn't want you to do that. So they said, well, land it in the sod. Well, I didn't want to do that because I knew what would happen. Since the nose of the front here is low, when you come in into the sod, you're going to start pulling up sod in front of you. And pretty soon it builds up enough, you're going to flip over upside down. I said, remember, I'm the only guy on this airplane. You might tell me what you want me to do, but you can't make me do it. I'm the only guy here. I'm 19 years old. So I told him I'm going to land on the runway. And the reason is I didn't trust this parachute. So I went, they said, well, fly around for a couple hours and use up fuel. and then come on back and you can land on the runway. Okay. So I did that, and I finally come back, call them up again. Seymour Johnson Tower, Army 391, left base, runway 31, landing, over. Clear to land, they say. Well, I turned final approach, and of course I had the right gear up, so I had them both up. You don't want to land with one down. Yeah. So I had them both up, and I looked down there, my God, they had fire trucks, ambulances, jeeps, camera photographers, guys. Well, how often do you get to see someone kill himself with 2 hours' notice? They thought they were going to see a big ball of fire going down the runway, of course, which is what apparently most of them had done in the past. Yeah. So I come on down. As when I got down, we come in at final approach when we slowed way down to 130 miles an hour. That was the slowest we ever get. If you go slower than that, the damn thing's going to drop out of the sky. So I slowed her down to 130, and then as I got close, I started turning off everything. I turned off the radio, and then I started turning off. You know, I'm just gliding really. So you pull the throttle back, you turn the gas off, you turn off all of the electrical control, turn off everything. I got everything turned off. You know, I had the canopy open, I had my oxygen mask off, and all that stuff. Finally got real close, and just when you get close, you're a glider then at that point. and you just kind of like the Sullenberg. You come down at exact speed that you want, and then you gradually just pull the nose up and touch tail first. And I heard the front of it go click, 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 click. Of course, that was the prop digging into the asphalt. And then click, click, click. This is when the whole thing just dug in, and it put all 4 of these things, it just pulled them back around the front of the plane. I mean, this came all the way back over the cowling of the thing. Well, before we were still doing 50 miles an hour or so. Remember, we slowed down from 130 maybe to 50, then 40 and 30. When it got down to about 20 or 25, I said, I'm going to get the hell out of here. We had a big rear view mirror, and I could look in there, and all I could see was white sparks. You know, the scraping of the plane on the asphalt. White sparks going everywhere, and I thought, man, this thing's liable to go up in a big single puff of flame. So I stepped over the side and was holding on to the side of the cockpit with my hands, and it slowed down to real slow, I don't know, 5-10 miles an hour, and I took off running on the left wing. I got to the end, I just kept on going. I don't think I missed a step when I got onto the ground. And I went maybe 100 feet or so, and then I just turned around and sat down on the ground on top of all this crap. And here comes the fire trucks and the ambulances and the jeeps and a whole bunch of other trucks with mechanics on it and all. And I'm sitting there watching all this. Finally, after 15 minutes or so, a little jeep comes around and he looks at me and says, "Lieutenant, would you like a ride?" I said, "I think I'll just sit here." But, you know, the mechanics came out. All they did was put a big airbag under each wing and push the thing up. Yeah. We found out what had happened. There's something on both gears that's called a shrink strap. And the reason is when the gear is totally extended, it's quite long. Well, it's too long to go up inside the little compartment where it goes when it retracts. So as it goes up, it compresses it, shortens it. And that thing had broken. It got all the way up and then broke, and bang, it was up there doing like that. You know, it couldn't get back out. Yeah. So thank goodness I hadn't done anything wrong. So they didn't give me hell for that. So I finally got a ride back and went on in. And the next morning, they had me in another plane. And it's like if you fall off a horse, you get right back on type of thing. And that plane was fine. I didn't have any more trouble then. Believe it or not, a week later, they had this plane going again. You know, they put new engine, new prop, and that type of stuff on it. Wow. Well, they had a lot of mechanics. And a week later, they had the plane back flying again. So that was kind of fun. I enjoyed that. The postscript to that little story, about a month later, I had long since forgotten about it. I went to the Post Theater on a Saturday night. I was by myself, and I'm sitting there in the seat. At the beginning of the movie, they always have what they call First Air Force News. And the First Air Force News comes on, and up here they said, how to land a P-47 gear up on the runway. And I thought, damn, I should have seen this. Before I did it, I'd known what to do. Well, of course, here was Army 391. And I watched, I saw it go down, the sparks flying everywhere, and just at the end, I saw this idiot jump out and run off the wing. You know, I would give anything to have a copy of that film. But obviously I didn't, but that was kind of fun. So at that point we went to Norfolk, Virginia. And Norfolk, Virginia, we took over the Air Force took over their regular commercial airport and made it into a combination commercial and Army Air Corps training center. So we had a bunch of P-47s up there. And this got into what they call combat training, which was either air-to-air training or it was air-to-ground training. And this is where we really got into we had rockets on our plane. I haven't mentioned. We had 7 rockets under each wing. And we would come in and we'd come in and fairly low and shoot our rockets out, and they'd put a target there. And one guy at a time would come in and bang, and they put a big old plane out there, and they'd shoot a rocket off. Well, I did that, and we could, just one at a time, you know, that way you'd get 16 times of it, 14 times of it. Well, my turn came around, and I forgot to put the damn thing on single shot, and I put it on salvo.
Oh.
And I came on down, I got the mountain. Boy, I was right on that sucker too, and all was okay. The guns were here, the rockets were on your thumb. So I pushed my thumb down, and all of a sudden, I blew the whole damn plane into smithereens. There wasn't anything left for anybody else. Boy, they called me back. Cavin, what the hell are you doing down there? So gee, this was only the first mistake I ever made in the Air Force. So I screwed up again, but I was going down like that, and I pulled away, and my feet were wet. And I thought, what the hell is that? And I looked down, and there was fuel. Remember, this is 130 octane. There was fuel coming in to the bottom of the cockpit, and it was up about that high. That scared me to death. I was afraid to even push the mic push button to talk, because I thought, you know, what if it sparked? There'd be a big ball of fire in the air. But the gas kept getting deeper and deeper, and so I immediately had headed back toward Norfolk. And I finally got enough nerve to call, because they had commercial liners landing and all that, and I called them up. Norfolk Tower, Army so-and-so. I've got an emergency, I'm coming in to land. And this woman, air traffic controller, well, Army so-and-so, stand by, we've got a commercial on the left base or something. I figured, silent, go to hell, I'm going to land, you know. So I come on in, scared to death. This thing's just going to have a big ball of fire in the sky. By that time, the gas was, yay deep. And I went ahead and landed on a big long runway and taxied over to where the military, we had half of the airport, did that and climbed out and then ran like hell. And they found out later what happened. Right behind where the pilot sits, well, I didn't tell you, we've got about a ½ inch of metal, kind of shaped like so. So if anyone gets behind you and shoots bullets, they wouldn't hit me. But nobody was shooting bullets here. We've also, right behind that, we've got about a 175-gallon tank of 130 octane gas. Something had happened to the fuel line from that up to the engine, and it ruptured in the cockpit, and here I was with 130 octane gas, a foot deep. Things were happening so fast, and everybody was in such a rush, and the equipment wasn't the best. Some very dangerous things happened en route, you know. You just never quite knew what was going to happen. You try to be careful as you could, but it was just a dangerous game we were flying.